Today we have a little bit of a mystery. It's not super well documented online, but there are at least 3 versions of the JX-8P, arguably a 4th, and they all sound slightly different. And the question I have is, which one is the best? And secondly, when you have a clone or a reimagination like the JX-8 and the PG8X VST online, which of these are those modeled after? Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Zach Marr from Alamo Music here in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications. This is our Alamo Sound Lab channel where we talk about all things music tech related. And today we're talking about something incredibly nerdy. We're talking about the different revisions of the JX-8P and the tonal differences in each of these. And I think it's relevant because with all these VSTs and these clones coming out, people have such strong reactions to whether or not it sounds like an original. And oftentimes that is not qualified with which original are you talking about. And I think it came to my mind when I saw Espen's Craft's video comparing the JX-8 to a vintage JX-8P, and he was using one of the JX-8Ps. I think it was a version like this with the gray buttons and no preset labels on it. And I sat down and I started playing the 2 JX-8Ps that we have and realized that they sounded different, and I remembered that there are different revisions of this. And so when you're having a conversation about how accurate something is, you have to take into account which revision you're talking about and which revision the original was designed to emulate. And I think his video is awesome, and I really appreciated his perspective and his playing, which is much better than mine. But I wanted to pick up and contribute, I hope, to the conversation about JX-8Ps because I don't think it's incredibly well documented. So apparently, I think this might be the earliest revision. It has, it's got a 2-prong cord on the back, so it's not a 3-prong. And it also, you can find out if it's an early revision, it will have the preset written on the buttons, and they're kind of a white color. And apparently, and I'm not sure which of these has which in it, but the op amps on the different revisions were different. Some of them had the JRC op amp, which is legendary for being in the Ibanez Tube Screamer and other electronics from Japan at the time. And then a lot of the other ones had Sharp op amps, which, and I wrote down, I'm gonna look it up because I can't remember for the life of me what the model numbers are for them, but the JRC is the 4558, which is kind of a legendary op amp, and then the Sharp is an IR9458, and so so those apparently have different tones. And someone also put that there's some that have an NECC4558, but I couldn't tell if that was just another JRC, just labeled differently. It seemed to be that some people thought that. But regardless, they all give the keyboard, the JX-8P, a different feel. And some of them are a little warmer and just I think this earlier revision sounds better than the latter revision. And that's a personal preference thing. But they definitely, this one, which was latter, definitely gives me more of a kind of DX vibe than the original. And I think that's because that's what that was what was in vogue at the time. And so manufacturers that were still making analog synths were trying to get them to sound as much like a DX7 as possible. And so you could make the story, and I don't know if this is accurate, but you could make the assumption that something that sounded more digital was considered to be better, and so those design choices were made. And as I've said in another video, the JX10 sounds even more digital and kind of almost sterile to me than the JX-8P. And I think that those are little circuitry choices that were made over the course of these instruments. So I think it's an interesting thing to consider. Apparently there's a 3rd version that sounds a little different than either of these that has got white buttons and no presets, and I think there's also one with gray buttons and presets, and so maybe there's a fourth version. Another difference that I can hear, but it's not documented anywhere, is the chorus. The chorus on this one is a lot noisier, and that seems to be the case. The choruses in the earlier revisions were a lot noisier than the choruses in the latter revisions. And I think that is also interesting because in the JX-8, the chorus effect that they're using seems to be modeled after the original. It's a very noisy chorus emulation, and it's also got a lo-fi compressor, and I want to say it's probably modeled after the earlier and I think better sounding JX-8Ps. And what's also interesting about that is I don't know if I would have fallen in love with the JX-8P the way I did if this had been my first JX-8P. This was the first one that we had, and I love the tone of it. I don't love the tone of this one, and it could be all in my head, and this may need to be calibrated or something, but I really think I would not have fallen in love as hard if I hadn't played on this one first. And the JX-8 gives me that color and that palette and reminds me of this instrument more so than that instrument. So I just wanted to share. I think this is an interesting conversation. Would love to continue it if you have more information on this. I also have a theory. Don Solaris started working at Roland not too long ago, and I think he must have been he must have been involved in some way in the JX-8. I hope he is, or hope he was, because I think in some of these conversations on the web about revisions of the JX-8P, he was part of those conversations, and it would be really cool if he got to put that into design practice and sound design with the JX-8. Don't know if that happened, but it would be cool if that was the case. So again, these are just some things I wanted to share. I think it's an interesting conversation about the JX-8P and the JX-8, and I haven't played with the PG8X, but I'm curious which of these it would remind me more of. And I think it's interesting because some people are arguing about which one sounds more like a JX-8P, and it gets even more confusing when you bring up the different revisions and the choices that these designers are making when they make an emulation. So anyway, let's listen to both so you can hear the differences. They're minute, and you might even say, why did you make this video? But again, this is for synth lovers, and it's just a nerdy topic, and I enjoyed making the video. So let's take a listen, and I'll conclude with some final thoughts. All right, there you have it. If I had to describe sonically the difference, I think this one is just a little richer in its overall tone and the spectrums that it hits in the color and the feel. This sounds duller to me. It sounds like it's been flattened out. Some patches, like the bell patch, actually sounds a little better on the JX-8P, the second revision, or whatever revision, the latter revision. And in this one, it doesn't sound quite as nice, but on the pads and the piano patches, I prefer the JX-8P. And in the brass, the poly brass, I prefer the JX-8P tone over, the first revision, or the earlier revision over the latter revision. I think that's just my tonal preferences. I'm curious what you heard, if you could hear the difference, if it translated to YouTube, if I'm just a lunatic for making this video and it just looks absurd. Would love to hear your thoughts. Please share them below. What JX-P do you own or have you had experience with? Do you have information about the third and fourth revision? Would love to continue this conversation and hopefully better inform people about these wonderful instruments. And until next time, play lots of music. Talk to you soon.